Citizens' assemblies may be an untapped means of grappling with Armenia's various challenges, but what exactly is a citizens' assembly and how can that fit into the Armenia context? To discuss this and more, I'm joined by Richard Wilson, the CEO of the ISWE Foundation. So Richard Wilson, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
So to start off, in layman's terms, if you were explaining to our average watcher, what exactly is a citizens' assembly? I know there's also lots of different terms for it. It can be called a citizens' jury, citizens' panel, people's jury, etc. So what exactly is a citizens' assembly?
So a citizens' assembly is kind of like a people's parliament, whereby people are selected by lottery, civic lottery. So you'll have a group of people, I think that we're going to have 200 for the Convention for the Future Armenian, which will be a exact demographic representation of the Armenian diaspora, the Armenian population, and so it's a way of thinking about a people's parliament really. And those methods that you described are examples of the last sort of 40 years we've been doing this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And the current incarnation is called a citizens' assembly.
Okay, so it's maybe a form of participatory democracy.
Exactly.
As well? Okay, so is it a platform, like a forum for discussions? What exactly will take place in a citizens' assembly?
So really they've evolved from being simply a platform for discussions maybe 40 years ago to now they're really becoming more like new bits of governance infrastructure, because we know many of the challenges we face today could be around climate, could be security issues, could be around public services, making health work or responding to the pandemic. We know that people have got a lot of power, whether we choose to socially distance, whether we decide to use energy. And we're realizing we need new forms of governance infrastructure which really bring people to the table with government as actual power holders. So in the past, you might have had representative democracy whereby, politicians would represent people. Right. This is more about saying, actually, no, you people have got real power. You really matter. And we need new kinds of governance infrastructure, new governance chambers, if you like, that ensure that people's power is properly acknowledged. So sure, they might make recommendations for politicians, but they will probably make recommendations for public services, for communities themselves to act in different ways. So it's trying to really open up the idea of who has really got power and acknowledge that actually many of us need to be part of both negotiating the current and the future and be part of that. So not just about expecting politicians to act, but actually expecting us all to be part of negotiating and agreeing and actually acting on to create the future.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we know representative democracy, is about elections and people are elected to represent, but who exactly will take part in a citizens' assembly?
Yeah, so this will be for this one, for the Future Armenian, there will be 200 people who will be 45% will come from Armenia, 50% from the diaspora, and then I think 5% will come from Artak. And they will be, again, they'll be selected by civic lottery. I think 10,000 people have applied. They will be then segmented to ensure they are a precise representation of those groups. So in a way, you would say it's a real people's parliament. It's a precise representation by gender, by age, by education of what Armenia really looks like today.
Okay, so you mentioned the Convention of the Future Armenian, which is this event coming up. What did it take to get to this point of having this convention? Is there any precedence in Armenia with this sort of thing, or is this really a new, innovative approach?
So it is new. It's the first time there's been a citizens' assembly, as I understand it, in Armenia. There's a global president, so we're going through a real, what we call a wave of citizens' assemblies around the world now. There's been over 200 in the last 5 or 6 years globally. And to get to this point, it's been an incredible effort. So there's been, for example, advertisements in California. There's been networks in France to kind of get the diaspora involved. And actually what's so groundbreaking about this Citizens' Assembly is we think it's the first time there's ever been a Citizens' Assembly that's involved the diaspora. We don't think that's ever happened before.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask also about that. The diaspora will be involved. You said that it's going to even have a whole percentage. Was it 50% around about? So the diaspora is a sort of a difficult entity to describe or to define in some ways. So what I'm wondering is, how will the diaspora be involved in this convention? Will it have also diaspora issues will be discussed as well? How will the diaspora? Can you speak a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of how they will be precisely involved, so we've looked at the populations. In Russia, in France, in America, in other countries around the world, we've tried to ensure that 50% is a accurate reflection of those proportions. The discussions that will be undertaken will be absolutely looking at diaspora-related issues. And I think it's really going to be about trying to create that sense of what does this group of people think should be the priorities for Armenians globally going forward.
Mm-hmm. And then after the convention, will the public be able to know, for example, what was discussed? What will be available then to the public?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible about everything, both where the agenda has been set, how the agenda has been set, both how things will be taken forward. So a report will be produced whereby all the recommendations will be outlined. And what we're really hoping to do is start to create a public debate around what needs to happen. So it's not just about representative democracy voting every few years, but actually more about change happens quickly. Things need to happen more quickly than that. And so what do people want now and how can we respond to that? So do foundations want to take things forward? Do communities want to take things forward? Do politicians want to take things forward? Through my work, I've noticed how in different places, citizens' assemblies play different roles. So we've just finished running a big global assembly for the COP process. What mattered then was to be able to show to politicians and negotiators is people globally really care about things like loss and damage, or these issues which sometimes are seen as controversial in the negotiation. Actually, there's real consensus between your population. The politicians might disagree, but actually the people don't disagree. And so what we think that's helping to do is often provide political space for politicians to be way more ambitious.
Mm. And it was also interesting that in a way it might even be more representative than an actual legislator, in the sense that it's a citizens' lottery. You may have people of different social classes, geographic areas, even the diaspora, various countries. So it's really going to be a broad plethora representing Armenian society, not just in Armenia and abroad. So, I mean, in a way, it might even be more representative than the Armenian legislator.
Well, in terms of demographic representation, they always are more representative. They just are. It's just, the kinds of people who can become politicians, they're usually people who they haven't got caring responsibilities. There'll be less parents, there'll be less older and younger people. By definition, a citizens' assembly has to be more demographically representative than a normal political class of people. That's just how they work.
Okay. And finally, Richard, what can people look out for? How can people follow what's happening with this convention?
Yeah, well, we'll go to the website and check out there. I think we're going to be having resources which will become available, I think, in something like 2 or 3 weeks' time. And we're going to be putting lots of media around the event itself. And I think what we're really hoping to do is, in the final day of the convention, we'll be saying, what do they want to focus upon next? Because what we're hoping is this becomes a permanent piece of Armenian governance. So it's not just a one-off, not just this time, but actually becomes a kind of something that happens on an annual basis, a little bit like a state of the union for Armenia. This is what the people in Armenia want to focus upon next. And then in between these big conventions, we can have community discussions, we can really have an engine for driving public debate around what do the people want to do next.
Mm-hmm. And driving change in that regard.
Hopefully.
Well, Richard Wilson, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.